I'm Karen Woodrow, owner of Visiting Angels, a senior home care provider based right here in Chelmsford, and this is The Q, a talk show where our panel speaks with experts on a variety of subjects surrounding the current pandemic. For the next 20 minutes or so, we hope to answer some of your questions about the quandary we all find ourselves in during this unprecedented quarantine. Today, we're going to talk about isolation, especially as it relates to our senior community. According to the Population Reference Bureau, 42% of American households are headed by someone aged 65 or older living alone. That's over 11 million people. The likelihood of living alone increases with age. Among women aged 75 or older, almost half lived alone at the time of the 2010 census. This number is expected to be much higher this time around since people are now living longer. Even seniors living in congregate housing are now being confined to their rooms and feeling lonely. For those of us living in quarantines with partners and kids of all ages and even pets, there's still something very isolating about being confined to home or limited spaces and limited people. In case you haven't noticed, I'm sitting in the cupboard under my stairs in the basement. This is what isolation can feel like for many people. It's a pretty small space and it feels like the walls are closing in. Research shows that isolation and loneliness are linked to high blood pressure, obesity, heart disease, a weakened immune system, depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, and early death. To help us prevent all that, our guest today is Deb Siriani, Executive Director of the Chelmsford Senior Center. Although the Senior Center is temporarily closed right now, Deb is leading the charge on many programs geared towards supporting our local area seniors who choose to stay home to stay healthy. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Lisa Maroney, Director of Business Development for the Town of Chelmsford and the lead host of The Q. Lisa will kick off our discussion on alleviating isolation in Chelmsford's senior community and focus this pandemic through Q colored glasses. Lisa?
Well, Karen, thank you very much for that segue and lead in. Very informative, and also bringing up that topic of isolation, which is really uncomfortable for some of us and not knowing how to deal with that, and particularly for the elderly. And those statistics that you mentioned were a little bit unsettling, to say the least. So in some regard, this panel that we have here today, we are all touched in some way by dealing with people in isolation, elderly people in isolation, in particular to this pandemic. So what I'd like to do is move the discussion around between us. I've mentioned a few times in my past, I'm involved in this topic because my mother is in isolation right now. And we talk about that a little bit later, but what we'll do is maybe direct this over to Deb Siriani so she can give us an update on specifically how the town of Chelmsford is handling the elderly isolation and the relation to the pandemic and things like that. So Debbie, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Loved your shows so far. You guys have been doing a great job, so thank you. Part of it is just reaching out, so I'm glad we're doing that. Trying to find new ways to reach out to people. Right now, our senior center is closed to the public, but we have our full staff is here on some modified schedules, but our phones are here and manned. So if people want to call and ask any questions or need anything from us, we're here at 978-251-0533. Also, we're sending out Meals on Wheels every weekday. And if you are at home and isolated and feel that you can't get enough food, then we have lots of resources, not just Meals on Wheels, that we can help you with. So call that number, and we can talk about the different options. Right now we're sending about 160 Meals on Wheels every weekday morning. That's one thing we're doing.
Debbie, you do many amazing things.
Should I go on?
So thank you, Debbie, for all that you do, and it's an excellent resource for the town. I greatly appreciate all of your efforts to keep things moving as normally as possible. I do find that, I know that Jen and I have talked a few times, that pets in particular are very important to the older population, and not necessarily for companionship, but for a therapeutic measure. To have a cat or a dog or something to just care for and keep company is really important. And I know that Karen mentioned that in her lead-in, and I know, my dog is very important, and I'm not even really isolated or elderly at this point, but pets are important. And as Debbie had said, just that human interaction, just a phone call is very, really comforting. And I think Jen could maybe talk a little bit about what that means if you can't see a person, if they don't have technology for FaceTime or maybe even watching this show, a phone call, hearing a familiar voice, being able to know that someone cares enough to chat on the phone. My challenge is it's really tough to talk to my mother on the phone. It doesn't work that well. We have this same, what can you really talk about with someone that's in isolation? We talk about the weather, those types of things. But I'm going to turn this over to Jen, and she can feed us some info a little bit on how to manage this aspect.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So, when Karen was talking, she mentioned something that really struck me, and it was about, she said something about how, even when you're not alone in your home, it can still feel isolating. And I feel that a lot. I'm not alone in my home. I'm at home with my husband and my two sons, who I affectionately refer to as the frat boys, because they're college boys that are home and, stay up till 2 a.m. and sleep till 2 p.m. kind of thing. So, but, despite the fact that I have 3 other people in the house with me, I have been feeling, the isolation that comes with just sort of being confined, seeing Karen in her little small Harry Potter cupboard under the stairs, just kind of really gives a visual image to that feeling of being confined to one place. And I find that one thing that helps me a lot is sometimes I just have to get in my car and go for a drive, because sometimes, despite the fact that I'm surrounded by people, what I actually really need is to be alone. And there's a difference between, being alone and feeling lonely. And you can feel lonely when you're surrounded by people, and you're not always feeling lonely when you're by yourself. So, I think even a change of scenery like that, and I know that's not possible for all of our seniors, some of which, may not drive anymore. And so it would be a little bit more challenging. But for those who can, sometimes that change of scenery, just even my 19-year-old son is doing it. He'll ask me for the keys to my car so that he can just go out for a drive and, be able to see something outside of the 4 walls of our home. But Lisa, you're right. I think, being able to connect with people in ways that we aren't used to connecting with them when we can't see our friends and our loved ones and our family members. It reminds me of just this morning, I did some grocery shopping for one of our senior residents, someone who will be turning 92 in 2 days. And I went to her place and picked up her shopping list this morning, and then I went to Market Basket and then brought her groceries back for her. And we were chatting a little bit, and I asked her about, she has some children, she had told me, and I asked her how her Mother's Day was. And, she just looked at me and she said it was terrible. And because she's home alone, and even though she has, her children, they can't come and see her. but what she does get daily is she gets a visiting nurse that comes in every day. And I think, Karen's business provides this type of a service where caregivers are going into the home, sometimes daily, for folks, and sometimes that's maybe their only interaction that they're getting, and it can be just so important for them. So things like being able to bring in outside help like that are coming in, or as Lisa said, connecting by the telephone, or if seniors do have access to technology, maybe they haven't been using it up until this point, but maybe this is the time that it's right for them to kind of learn how to use it and move on. But I think Megan too can probably talk a little bit about being in a house full of people and still going a little bit stir crazy, right, Megan?
Absolutely. I went for a drive this weekend on Mother's Day. I couldn't take all the love, so I had to just get out. And it just felt good. It just felt good to drive and just be one with my thoughts and not answering someone else's problem or question. But when I came home, honestly, I missed my kids. I missed that, and I was excited to see them. That little break was enough. And I thought about my grandmother. My grandmother passed away last year. She was 101, and she was living alone in her house in Lexington. And my mother, who was a saint, she's a nurse, retired nurse, and she was really her one-on-one caregiver. She did have wonderful people coming from outside, services coming into her house to help her and keep an eye on her. She had someone to come to clean her house, but and nurses to come and check on her. She was very healthy, thankfully, and she was just so smart and sharp and amazing. But she was isolated in her house when she didn't have my mother there, or I didn't come down with my kids. She was really alone. And one thing we found that was great for her was a tape recorder. And we gave her a tape recorder because I loved going down and listening to her tell stories of World War II and the Depression, and stories of my grandfather, and funny stories of my mom growing up. And some of the stories were really funny, and some of them were really amazing to know that she lived through these times. But she recorded them, so she had a little microphone attached to the tape recorder, and I would just start it when I was down there talking to her, and she would just kind of talk and talk and talk. And that, I think, was the best therapy for her. She would often call me that night, and it was hard to talk to her on the phone too. She was very hard of hearing. And my kids would know I was talking to Great Nana because I was screaming in the phone, and they would I could see them laughing, giggling. And when they would go down, they would instantly start like talking to her like this, really loud. But that is a big challenge. Using technology, I think, is super hard. Being away from your family is really hard. My grandmother would love these huge hugs from us, and I think not having that for the elderly population is got to be, one of the worst things as well. But maybe having a task, something that they can, record for their families, memories that they have. It might, bring up some thoughts that they had, or a happy memory that they haven't thought about in a while. And then that's a great gift to give to your family. I know that after my grandmother passed away that night, actually, I left the hospice and I went home, and I just played tape of her talking. And it was so comforting to me. And I could see her in her chair telling the stories. And I think that for your mental health might be something that people who are in isolation might feel, compelled to do, or it might help them.
So I guess I'd like to try to circle this back to Karen and hear maybe some thoughts in regard to the options of how to offset some of the elderly isolation, because thankfully Jen was able to visit a Chelmsford resident and stay 6 feet apart or whichever, and be able to provide help and support. I visited my mother yesterday, as I have through the window shopping visit, but I haven't really been able to talk to her necessarily. And we just do this silly little made up sign language kind of thing that we do. Yesterday, for the first time, they opened the window a little bit, and I stayed back with my mask on, those types of things. So we're all trying to be creative. We're all trying to manage as positive as we can with elderly isolation, and then, isolation in general. But I don't know if Karen has any other comments to add that might help us be able to manage this any better.
I think that what everyone is doing now, what you said, Lisa, and what Meg was talking about with her great-grandmother or grandmother are really great things to do, because being connected to other people is one of the most important things we can do for our physical health and for our mental health. So the more people that a senior can reach out to, the better off that they'll be feeling. For others that have the opportunity, helping others, volunteering, even from your home, that's a great way to boost your immune system and feel better about things if you're doing things for others. Also connecting with yourself and maybe asking your seniors to reconnect with who they were when they were younger. On Mother's Day yesterday, we talked to my mother about what she remembered about VE Day when the war ended. What was, I watched on the news what they were broadcasting on the news about that, and I was wondering how did she feel on that day? Does she remember it? And that brought back some conversation about my dad, who was in World War II, and the whole family. He had lots of brothers serving. So reconnecting with yourself, asking yourself, what did you used to do when you were little before technology to occupy your time? Any activity that you used to do that just sort of takes you out of the thinking process and just makes you focus on where you are right now is a
great idea.
Another thing is to maintain a routine. Make sure your seniors are getting up at a certain time. Getting dressed is very helpful. Having meals on a regular time and getting good sleep. Those can all help. And I think that holding on to hope that there's going to be a bright future ahead also helps us. And I think that Deb can now take us through some other things that they're doing at the senior center to help seniors accomplish all these things. I know there's a lot of workshops going on and just Zoom calls and support groups. And I think that even if you don't have technology, everybody has an old-fashioned telephone, and just pick up the phone and call the Chelmsford Senior Center. There'll be someone there to take your call, whether it's Deb or not, or even call the Town of Chelmsford, because Jen Melanson can be there to help you. And just hearing a voice, the more touches you have with other people, even if it's not a physical touch like we are all craving, I think it's going to be very helpful. So Deb, do you want to talk about the other things the Senior Center's doing?
Sure, I would love to. Thank you. So a few other things we have on Zoom. We're expanding our programming to virtual programming. So we have our Alzheimer's caregiver support group is on Zoom, and that is 2 times a month on Mondays. Again, just call the Senior Center and we'll connect you with it. And we have our newsletter out for, what month is it? May. It's unbelievable, isn't it? And so we're doing that group. We're also doing an LGBTQ support group through Zoom. We're doing our Buried in Treasures support group, but that is a closed group that's already formed through Zoom. And then we're starting a new series with William James College, and their professors are helping us to run what's called Coping and Connecting with Seniors. And so we'll be doing 2 Zoom meetings per month for the next year, we've decided, as a series on connecting with people and learning how to cope with different issues that might be coming up. So, of course, we're talking about COVID. So coping and connecting through COVID is our first one. And that is, May 14th. And it's called Developing Your Social Support Network. And then the second one we're doing on May 28th. And that's called The Art of the Social Phone Call, which sounds strange. But like you said, sometimes you're talking on the phone and it's the same thing. What other things can be done to kind of expand that phone call, kind of like asking different questions and how to connect to different people. So if you have a Zoom account, that's fine, but otherwise you can call in with your phone. So we're trying to teach people about the platforms that are up and available now too. So those are a few things we're doing right now.
Debbie, those are such important initiatives that you're doing. I know that you reach out and have a very genuine connection in helping the elderly in Chelmsford, and from what I've witnessed in other municipalities, you're doing extraordinary things for the age-friendly initiative for Chelmsford. Just the aspect of transferring everything onto Zoom platforms, it's just amazing to me. Of all the things you do, you have no fear. You are not afraid to try anything new.
I'm not doing it. I have wonderful staff that are doing it, thank God.
I'm just, very thankful. And overall, not to, but just this aspect of what we're all trying to do and contributing and making a difference to our community, I think is really impressive from my perspective. And part of what this Q is all about is to bring forward the knowledge and education of how we each can take a piece of this and deal with it, and the questions that those conversations, and trying to tackle down these difficult discussions. So with Karen under the stairs and Deb in her office and Jen running back and forth to doing groceries, and Megan talking from her bathroom. I mean, right? This is how we're getting it all done. And I just really enjoy being connected with all of you. And this show brought us together. So this is great. Thank you so much. And if there's any last minute words, I think we can wrap up this episode of the Q and look forward to next week.
I do want to say that if there are any seniors out there that feel like they do need that one-on-one contact, Visiting Angels is open for business. We do have caregivers. We are private pay, and our caregivers are trained in proper hygiene, following CDC guidelines, making sure that the area is safe. If it's just companionship, we can follow social distancing. If you need more one-on-one personal care, they are dressed head to toe in our personal protective equipment. So if you've reached a point where you really do need someone, Visiting Angels can be there for you.
Thank you, Karen. And I know that this show will advertise all of our contact information from each of us as well. And we are here to serve the public and provide support. And Debbie, I certainly very much look forward to learning from the art of the social call. I'm all about that. That would be great. And I'd like to wrap up this show. Thank you very much, everyone, for contributing to the Q. Looking forward to our next episode all together.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. These
Thank you, Karen.